Hello, Arts and Culture of Asia students. Welcome to our second of three videos concerned with the philosophy and belief of ancient China. In our previous video, we went over the basic elements, both the principles of the Book of Changes and its basis in this idea of yin and yang, ordering and governing the whole of the cosmos. We also looked at the diagrams within the so-called, not so-called, the actual divination diagrams called hexagrams and tetragrams. So we'll pick those up again in a moment. And we learned how, while they're operating through a divination framework, they invite philosophical reflection. And they also are a form of engaging with reality and the challenges of existence, the challenge of being human in a constantly changing world that allows for invariability to make it impossible to be sure that even a decision we make now based on very precise philosophical logic is going to make sense in the future in the same way that it does to us now. So in a nutshell, the Book of Changes tells us this Chinese understanding of the world is profoundly in flux and yet integrated, completely whole, and continuously regenerating with elements of constancy and elements of flux and change. The system of the Book of Changes and the divinations themselves, they are a way of philosophically engaging with the world, with such a world. And they're also comforting, even if you're not, and they're a way of working through change on your own personal level. So there's a therapeutic element as well, I would argue, in the Book of Changes, which is what I began the first lecture with. So let me share my screen today. This lecture, we're looking at Confucius and relating the Book of Changes to Confucius. Okay, so here we are. Confucius embraced this idea of change in the Book of Changes and applied it to human life and ethics very practically. He believed that just as the universe is constantly changing, human beings must adapt, adjust, and respond to change, and learn how to react appropriately to changing circumstances. For Confucius, the ability to navigate change with wisdom and virtue was central to achieving harmony in life. Relationships and governance. He saw changes as a guide to understanding these processes of change and how to act ethically within them. Remember, the italicized changes refers to the Book of Changes. So it's really is a tool for him to kind of refract or the virtuous character goes through this kind of system of possible confrontations with change, whatever they may be, and the virtues that come from facing changes, which might be humbling, which might be require us to be still and wait, whatever it is, those refine the virtue of a person. And remember, virtue is essential in a Confucian society, both in relationship to the system of piety, filial piety, terminating in the emperor and the mandate of heaven, the arrangement that the emperor has with a divine presence that as so long as the emperor rules well and with virtue, good things will be brought and assured for that emperor. This is the mandate of heaven. Of course, in the time of the late Zhou dynasty, in the spring and autumn period, and then the Warring States period, all of this certainty was shaken. And I think this is really important to remember that the Book of Changes and the commentaries and development of this text took place during that time of uncertainty. Well, the Book of Changes was originally used as divination tools. Confucius gave it a moral and ethical dimension. For Confucius, each hexagram and its corresponding lines provided lessons about how individuals should behave to maintain balance, integrity, and righteousness. In this way, Confucius transformed the I Ching, that's changes, I Ching, into a text for self-cultivation, moral education, where understanding the principles of change also meant understanding how to cultivate virtues like humility, integrity, and wisdom. Confucius believed that everyone could become virtuous or a noble person, Jinxi, by cultivating benevolence, Ren, and conducting himself or herself with propriety, Li. And those virtues are developed more in a discussion in your reading in this module, but they relate to the Book of Changes insofar as how we conduct ourselves with propriety, or how we live in a benevolent fashion, being kind to others. The golden rule, do unto others as thou would have others do unto you, essentially, is challenged by change, is challenged by the challenges of the unknown. Can we still be kind to our neighbor when we're suffering profoundly ourselves? And so this is that moment for Confucius. It's that very moment when you're faced with a change, when it is a challenge, and you choose virtuous actions that sharpens and deepens you as a more virtuous person. That being said, let's look at a few hexagrams. So we can look, these are two hexagrams from the Book of Changes. One is modesty, peace, and standstill. So we're just going to look at modesty, and maybe we'll look briefly at peace. These two hexagrams usually don't get too much attention in the Book of Change, but in modesty, lowly earth, right, rises above the lofty mountain. So you see here, this is you probably don't, I don't have them in front of you, but this tetragram here is mountain. And then remember, earth is all yin, and it's above the mountain. Mountains abound not only in the physical geography of China, but also in the spiritual imaginary of its people. The importance of the mountain throughout Chinese history is well documented, mountains being revered as divine sources of life-giving water, responsible for people's well-being and survival. Confucian, Taoist, and Buddhist traditions all claim sacred mountains. Mountains such as Taishan were visited annually. So such ritual observance had become an occasion or marker of respect, an opportunity to discover deeper meaning and significance. Hexagram 15 is one of the most auspicious divinations because modesty brings success. So you're the big, powerful mountain that is so revered in Chinese culture, but you're going to let in modesty the softer earth be above you. So it's asking the person who's received this hexagram to cultivate modesty, and to and to understand modesty is not a weakness. It describes a sage-like king, the mountain, who in respectful deference puts the interests of the people, the earth, above his own concerns. The people to work diligently, humbly sharing the fruits of their labor. Ruler and farmer work together. So we will be looking at mountains in Chinese painting in depth next week, and how powerful they are as signifiers of the Confucian ideals and principles. They're also very important for Taoism. And maybe when you go back to this video after you've completed next week's, actually 2 weeks from now's module on Confucian associations with mountains, but we can see how this can become, this is such a rich way of thinking about leadership, about society. And so the hexagrams and their nature bring out a certain kind of answer, a certain kind of question that enriches and deepens the Confucian principles of an ideal society. So, and here is an interesting one. Standstill. Here is heaven is abutting up against earth. It's conflict. It represents a situation of dispute or confrontation where harmony has been disrupted. The hexagram advises against engaging in prolonged conflict as it may lead to an unfavorable outcome. Instead, it encourages seeking compromise or resolution. That's a kind of, basically good example. And then we could go on, but I must move forward. And I want to say too that there's so many sophisticated practitioners of the Book of Changes, and there's so much depth under these hexagrams and commentary that I can only scratch the surface and give you a hint of how they relate to the cultural context and the belief systems that we're exploring in this class. They tend, what we wouldn't want to have happen is they're neglected because they're misunderstood as not philosophically reflective. But for those who are deeply engaged in divination and alchemy and all of these other elements relating to this text, that's kind of in another quadrant of thinking. And maybe for a different class. But at the most basic level, we can see these in deeply philosophical terms. So, oh, I should have had this out sooner. So these are, it's the hexagrams are inner states of moral states and virtues. So here you can see I have the diagram from our dear Fuji, the fundamental trigrams, and we have water. I think it's water. Is it water? Yes, it's water over the heavens. And so waiting, and that, that really evokes for me, I'm not going to, I have a lot of notes here, but I think it doesn't make sense to go into them. But think about it for a minute. Water over heaven. What does that mean? How does water, what does it evoke for you? A soft mist? The evaporative qualities of water, the water to become a fog, move from a rushing river into something utterly delicate that can float and be atmospheric, like above heaven in a sense, and waiting. And so, there's many ways to think about this trigram. It is associated with waiting. And according to one interpretation from a Confucian perspective, a certain Jack Balkin, or mind you, there's many interpretations. Zhu, which is waiting, waits patiently for the right moment for action and grows strong. So if you're that hovering mist, you're just kind of waiting, maybe waiting to consolidate into rain or waiting to fully evaporate. It's kind of like a pause. Song and conflict is the opposite. And so I'm going to move forward. Again, you can look up these and read about them, but I warn you, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. I recommend getting a good book, like with real pages, that's been peer reviewed properly, so you can really start with some solid scholarship, because there is so much out there online that's varied. Some of it's wonderful. All right. So while changes was, okay, this is the same. Here's modesty. I have a repeat. I'm so sorry. So for Confucius, each hexagram and its corresponding line provided lessons about how individuals should behave to maintain balance, integrity, and righteousness. So there you have it. Now, Confucius regarded the Book of Changes as one of the most important texts for cultivating wisdom and understanding the underlying principles of life. He said, if I had 50 more years to live, I would dedicate them to the study of the I Ching, or the Book of Changes. Confucius, or Jing, Yi Jing. Confucius believed that studying the Yi Jing helped develop moral insight, self-discipline, and a deeper understanding of the universe's patterns. So it's actually a source of knowledge of the universe as well. Not just a site of, not just a container or framework for one to reflect in a very personal or culturally or socially specific question, but it's also, as it has become a large volume of material, it's a place to study philosophy. He taught that balance and moderation were key virtues in life, what he called the doctrine of the mean, Zhongyong, and that individuals should seek harmony in all their actions. Confucius applied this concept to human relationships, emphasizing the importance of balancing one's own interests with those of others, and in governance, where rulers were expected to balance their power with virtue and compassion. So kind of keep all of this in mind as you're reading the Analects, because the Analects are these kind of, it's wisdom, right, and guidance, and very practical at times. But remember, casting the Analects through the prism of the Book of Changes, and how, imagine if you took some of what you're reading in the Analects and put it in the crucible of really hard, painful change, how much more virtue would be found in that very particular dictum in the Analects. So now we're going to look at some context material, some developments. So beyond Fuji and now moving into the Han Dynasty, which adopted Confucian thought as central to their beliefs and their principles of governance and so forth. So the Han Dynasty is it emerges after, finally, it emerges following the Qin Dynasty, finally ending the Warring States period. And you can go back to last week's lecture for that. The Qin Dynasty was very short-lived, but it established the basic perimeter of China. It was then the Han Dynasty that had 440 magnificent years to cultivate new ideas, invention of paper up here on the right, beautiful music here. You've done a lot with music this week and part of next week. And just move forward here. Whoops. Oh, apologies. So there was an important Confucian thinker that added to our understanding and the depth of the Book of Change, which is Dong Zhongzhu, and his contemporaries refined ideas and implications of the Book of Changes. According to them, all living and non-living things are constituted of qi, which has been translated as vital force, material force, or life force. Qi refers to yin and yang and the 5 phases of wood, fire, earth, metal, water, which evolve from the interaction of the two. Well, before there was this kind of articulation of qi, you just had a sense of the human being a part of this beautiful, fluid cosmos that's constantly in flux with certain constants in place. But the articulating qi as a life force, as a kind of life energy that is within also fully within the human body, because humans are made of the same elements that make up here our trigram, and also bringing now this other piece of our story, which is in Chinese cosmology, these principles of the elements. We're not going into that in too much depth, but the combination of yin and yang and the 5 phases of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, some of which we see up here in our trigram, it's what generates qi. And in the nice other video in the following page, that's not my lecture, the lecture that you'll listen to, it's 15 minutes long, talks about Chinese medicine and a lot of different ways in which the understanding of the body being fully and utterly connected to the energies that it's composed of, and also in a state of balance, and how that relates to the exterior elements in the world. I didn't say that very well. I think the lecture following this page does a better job. But the point is this development of qi as a vital force. This is quite important. Here it is. This is a picture I found. I hope it's not too schmaltzy. Because human beings are of the same substance as the rest of the universe, there is the possibility of communication between our environment and ourselves. That's qi, right? So all living and non-living things are constituted of qi, which has been translated as a vital force, material force, or life force. This is the worldview shared by all Chinese religions, that qi refers to yin and yang and the 5 phases of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Let's move forward. So remembering the mandate of heaven, the divine source of authority and the right to rule of China's early kings and then emperors, we can better understand now this idea of qi, moving between heaven and earth. I got another picture here. The orientation of heaven above earth and below, and every in between also remains constant through all changes. So there's this, we return to this trigram, which is also known as a bagua, and you might see them. They're very common, often with another Taoist symbol in the middle, which we'll look at in the final video. The virtues of heaven and earth by means of which they create, nourish, and benefit and sustain all things are unchanging, and the human virtues by means of which humans assist heaven and earth in their creative and nourishing functions. So we can see this kind of direct connection, and because there's this concept now are very well articulated of qi, a very clear correlation from a kind of cosmic and physiological or metaphysical level and physical level. Okay, so I'll just move forward. So I just want to remind you of the mandate of heaven and how it's linked to the Book of Changes. As a political doctrine, the claim is that heaven will support rulers who help people and bring disaster to those who don't, works on consistent patterns that encompass ethical and political concerns. Human beings determine their own success or failure based on these patterns. So here's the cycle of the mandate of heaven. Now, I'm going to end the lecture here. It's a pretty, short and sweet little talk about Confucius. And I'll be back. We'll finish our series with Taoism. So see you soon.